All right, for more now, we're joined by our correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who's in New York. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. How is this moment being received in the United States, given the chaos we all witnessed over the last few weeks and what can only be described as the toughest and darkest moment in presidency of Joe Biden to date?
Yeah, it's a tough pull, Unati, for a lot of Americans to swallow at this point, particularly veterans of the U.S. military that might have been engaged in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, particularly for diplomats who have worked with the State Department in terms of trying to build democratic institutions in Afghanistan, particularly for women's rights advocates, whether you're talking about the United Nations or the United States by and large. People are concerned about what happens next, given the void that has now been left by the United States military, and certainly a very acute, dark moment for this president that only took office in January this year, was implementing a timeline for withdrawal that was initiated by his predecessor with the Taliban. He'll talk a lot about the May 1st deadline that became the August 31st deadline, initiating a policy position that was started by former President Donald Trump as the U.S. military operation in Afghanistan now moves to a more diplomatic-focused mission, something articulated by the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken last night. This is what he said. Watch.
Now, U.S. military flights have ended, and our troops have departed Afghanistan. A new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan has begun. It's one in which we will lead with our diplomacy. The military mission is over. A new diplomatic mission. As of today, we've suspended our diplomatic presence in Kabul and transferred our operations to Doha, Qatar. We will use this post in Doha to manage our diplomacy with Afghanistan, including consular affairs, administering humanitarian assistance, and working with allies, partners, and regional and international stakeholders to coordinate our engagement and messaging to the Taliban.
Unati, we also heard a statement from President Biden last night. He says he will address the American people on his decision not to extend their presence in Afghanistan beyond August 31st. That will, of course, happen around 2:45 Eastern Time. That's about 8:45 p.m. Central African Time. For now, I will report that it was the unanimous recommendation of the Joint Chiefs and our commanders on the ground to end our airlift mission as planned. But still, we're at the beginning of the end, in a sense here. Lots of questions, congressional investigations into the chaotic implementation of this timeline of withdrawal. Certainly a lot of answers still to be given from the administration of Joe Biden and certainly many of his officials therein.
Now, Sherwin, the UN Security Council also passed a resolution on Afghanistan last night, a legally binding document that, among other things, calls on the Taliban to ensure that the country is not used to train and shelter terrorists or to be used to attack another country. What else does this resolution decide?
Yeah, it deals with, it firstly condemns the terrorist attack that we saw last Thursday outside Kabul airport. It demands that Afghan territory not be used to train and harbor terrorists, and certainly not to be used to launch attacks on other countries from Afghanistan. It calls for strengthened efforts around the provision of humanitarian assistance, and among a number of other issues. I'm going to let the ambassadors who spoke in the council yesterday, the US ambassador and the UK ambassador, better articulate exactly what this resolution does. Let's watch.
The Security Council expects the Taliban to live up to its commitment to facilitate safe passage for Afghans and foreign nationals who want to leave Afghanistan, whether it's today, tomorrow, or after August 31st. Last week's horrific attack in Kabul demonstrated the very real threat that terrorist groups like ISIS-K pose. President Biden has made clear that we will do what's necessary to defend our security and our people. And the entire international community is committed to ensuring that Afghanistan is never again a safe haven for terrorism.
This resolution shows that there is a minimum standard that the international community expect the Taliban to abide by. And the Taliban will be judged by their actions on the ground, not the words coming out of the presidential palace. And the Security Council, of course, has tools at its disposal to hold them to account for those actions.
I must also just point out that Russia and China abstained in that council vote. They criticized the process. They said that a number of their concerns and amendments were ignored in the final draft. China warned that in the face of fundamental changes in the domestic situation in Afghanistan, that it was necessary for the international community to engage with the Taliban and actively provide them with guidance. So some splits within the consensus in the UN Security Council, but this resolution now becomes international law. It expects a great deal from the Taliban. The question we have today is whether the Taliban will live up to those expectations, Unati.
Talking about criticism, Sherwin, we're also seeing reports that former President Donald Trump has slammed his successor for his handling of the withdrawal. What else is the Republican president saying as this mission now ends?
Yeah, as news out of Afghanistan with the final airlift completed, a statement from former President Donald Trump. He says never in the history has a withdrawal from war been handled so badly or incompetently as the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan. All equipment, he says, should be demanded to be returned immediately to the United States. He's now referring, of course, to the cache of equipment that has been left behind, including helicopters, artillery, weapons, trucks, armored vehicles, by the U.S. Expedited withdrawal from Afghanistan. And he says that all equipment should be demanded to be returned immediately to the United States, and that includes every penny of the $85 billion in cost. If it's not handed back, we should either go in with our unequivocal military force and get it, or at least bomb the hell out of it. The words of the former President Donald J. Trump. Bonatti.
Colourful as usual. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time. All right, Sherwin Bryce-Pease coming to us live there from New York.